Copper. Since the beginning of the year, copper has already gained 10%. Welcome to myfinanceteacher.org. Let's have a look at what's going on with copper and is there any potential left in the near and long term. Zooming out and looking at copper cycles, we do see in fact that since the beginning of this year, since the very beginning, the new year, the new cycle, copper has already started a new cycle which has been going on for around a month. Usually, historically, these copper cycles last for an average of 137 days, that's since the middle of 2018. But the duration of these cycles varies as well, from as little as only a couple of months to as long as 198 days, which again has been the longest since the beginning of that 2018. And to answer the question from a few seconds ago, yes, there is still some potential in copper, more on that in a minute. And while copper has already gained 10% during this cycle, into the remainder of the cycle, into the top of the cycle perhaps in another 1 or 2 months, copper is likely to continue pushing higher at least into the resistance of around 4.75, close to the top of the previous cycle. Usually there is a pretty good correlation between copper and the general stock market, and S&P 500 has in fact also started a new intermediate cycle. Hence, we are likely to grind higher in S&P 500 over the next couple of months, unless a black swan event with severe tariff escalation, for example, messes up the markets. But generally, as S&P 500 gradually grinds higher, so would copper into its new cycle over the next couple of months. We see that over the last several weeks, copper has broken above the 50-day moving average and has successfully retested it from the upper side, followed by a bit of a bounce over the last few days with a convincing break above the 200-day moving average as well. Yes, 14-day RSI has already dipped once into overbought a couple of weeks ago, but while not in the previous cycle, instead a couple of cycles ago, we have seen a similar scenario with RSI dipping into overbought within the first 3 weeks of the cycle, followed by another push significantly higher after a bit of a retest into the middle of the Bollinger Bands. So the outlook is still positive on the chart, which is also corroborated by the market sentiment. Here's Copper Optimism Index, Copper Optics, as one measure of market sentiment. And this optics in the longer term also fluctuates through good times and the bad times. In the good times, as in say 2021 and early 2022, copper cycles bottom out with this optics somewhere below the level of 50, as in say late June 2021. During the hard times, say through the second half of 2022 and all through 2023, copper cycles bottom out with the optimism index dropping all the way down below the level of 30, that's below this green dotted line. Since early 2024, copper has been in good times again. Copper cycles are bottoming out with the optimism index dipping below the level of 50. A month ago, the optics dropped all the way down to 42. And while copper has already gained 10%, the optimism index is far from this red line, which would indicate that some caution is advised. Hence, there is still some momentum left within the next several weeks to a couple of months for copper price, as suggested by this optics. Looking at the COT report, again we observe a relatively similar picture. The blue line here are the non-commercials, the speculators, often called the dumb money. The black line on the lower panel are the commercials, often called the smart money. You do see that the price peaks at the top of the chart usually coincide with the peaks of the blue line, that's the dumb money, while the price lows often coincide with the peaks in the black line for commercials. With one exception through the late 2020, early 2021, with this consistently long grind higher in copper prices after the pandemic low, when even the commercials didn't really expect copper to push that much through the prices of $3 and even $4 all the way into the price level of $5. So with that exception, usually commercials are the right ones. And what do you see into 2025? We see that commercials have likely peaked, increasing their positions by around 80,000 contracts. That's a significant increase. And over the last 3 to 4 weeks, we see those commercials decreasing their positions slightly, as copper has already gained 10%. But again, this decline in the commercials isn't significant yet. We see that these drops down into cycle lows usually take around 50,000 contracts on the commercial side. Hence, again, the COT report also suggests likely continuation in the upward momentum for copper price itself. But as I suggested at the beginning of the video, there's probably a better suggestion with the equities. This chart is copper price versus COPX, copper producers, copper equities. What I think might be happening here is a bit of a repetition of October-November 2023, as well as August-September last year. That's when copper price has already started moving higher, creating a higher low on this red line, while copper producers still continued their inertia down, creating a lower low. Same thing in the second half of last year, a slightly low on the producers versus a higher low on copper price. A couple of weeks ago, we see a bit of a dip in copper price. That was a decline of 6%, in fact, and a corresponding decline in copper equities too, perhaps repeating that scenario. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, providing you with that buying opportunity in copper equities. Talking about equities, uranium equities are not the only ones that we like to look at myfinanceteacher.org. As you know, we are also very interested in precious metals, and one of the examples of the equities we discussed at myfinanceteacher.org is of course Goliath Resources, which has recently been on the news in a very positive light. But way before this most recent news, back in February 2024, in fact, we had a detailed review of Goliath Resources, and since then the share price has rallied by over 90% into the most recent discovery-related positive news. This is simply one example showing you that detailed information is crucial in modern markets, and as you need to be an informed investor, make sure to join us at myfinanceteacher.org. Bye bye.